Before you drop another quarter into a vending machine, pause for just a second. Because right now, somewhere in a drawer, a piggy bank, or a forgotten coffee cup, there could be a Washington quarter worth more than a brand new car, maybe even more than your yearly salary. Today, we're diving into the top 3 most rare U.S. Washington quarters ever discovered. Coins so unbelievably scarce that even veteran numismatists spend decades searching for them without success. These aren't just rare. They're once-in-a-lifetime strikes, freak accidents of history, minting miracles that slipped into circulation when no one was watching. And if you find even one of these 3 legendary quarters, your ordinary pocket change could instantly transform into a jaw-dropping payday. So sit tight, because number 1 on this list is so mysterious and so impossible to find that collectors call it the Phantom Quarter, a coin many have heard of, but almost nobody has ever seen. Let's jump straight into the hunt. The story of the Washington quarter dollar in 1984 is part of a long journey that began many decades earlier, when the United States sought to honor its first president, George Washington, with a coin that would symbolize leadership, national unity, and American history. The Washington quarter was first introduced in 1932, marking the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and it became one of the most iconic and longest-running coin series in the nation. The 1984 Washington quarter stands as a chapter within that legacy, representing the mintage techniques, artistic decisions, and economic conditions of the early 1980s, a period when America was recovering from inflation, technological changes, and evolving minting standards. To understand the 1984 quarter, you must first look at the foundation of its design. The portrait of George Washington on the obverse was created by sculptor John Flanagan, whose design was selected after a national competition. The image shows Washington facing left with a detailed yet classical style that reflects the artistic traditions of the early 20th century. Though the design originated in 1932, it continued largely unchanged through 1984, maintaining the same dignified portrait that Americans had seen for over 50 years. By the time 1984 arrived, the Washington quarter had survived wartime silver shortages, post-war economic expansion, and the transition from silver to clad composition. One of the most important changes in the history of the quarter happened in 1965, when silver was removed from the coin and replaced with a clad composition made of copper and nickel. This shift was driven by rising silver prices, which made it impossible for the U.S. Mint to continue producing silver circulating coins. By 1984, the copper-nickel clad composition had been used for nearly 2 decades. The 1984 Washington quarter was struck with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a core of pure copper. This gave the coin a durability that made it ideal for heavy circulation, which is why many 1984 quarters today show significant wear. The year 1984 was also part of a period of technological improvement at the U.S. Mint. The presses were faster and more precise. Quality control methods were better, and minting facilities were producing billions of coins annually. The 1984 Washington quarter was struck at 2 main mints, Philadelphia and Denver. Philadelphia quarters carry no mint mark, while Denver quarters feature the D mint mark. Collectors often compare the strike quality between the 2 mints, noting that some Philadelphia coins may appear slightly weaker due to high production speed, while Denver coins are sometimes sharper, though this varies from batch to batch. In 1984, there was no special proof version minted in San Francisco because proofs had already become a tradition of that facility. Proof Washington quarters struck in 1984 featured deeply mirrored fields and frosted devices known as cameo contrast, making them highly desirable to collectors. The proof coins, however, were not released into circulation, but were packaged in annual sets for hobbyists. These proof sets are an important part of numismatic history because they reflect not only the craftsmanship of the U.S. Mint, but also the growing hobby of coin collecting during the late 20th century. The designs on the 1984 quarter remained the same as earlier years. The obverse featured George Washington, while the reverse displayed the American eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, representing both strength and peace. This reverse design had been used for decades and would continue until the introduction of the State Quarters program in 1999, which replaced the eagle with 50 unique reverse designs representing each state. Thus, the 1984 quarter belongs to the final era of the traditional eagle back. Collectors often study 1984. Washington quarters for interesting varieties, although 1984 is not known for major doubled die varieties or dramatic mint errors. Some examples do exist. There are off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, filled mint marks, and other small minting anomalies that attract collectors seeking unique pieces. In circulation, these errors may not be immediately noticeable, but they contribute to the broader story of 1980s minting practices and the imperfections that sometimes slipped through high-speed production. Economically, the early 1980s were a period of change for the United States. Inflation had reached high levels in the late 1970s, and the country moved into a period of tight monetary policies to stabilize the economy. Coins like the 1984 quarter played an essential role in everyday transactions because electronic payments were not yet widespread. The quarter was heavily used in vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, arcade games, payphones, and small purchases, making it one of the most frequently handled coins of the decade. As a result, millions of 1984 quarters circulated widely, and by the late 1980s, many already showed moderate wear. The Washington quarter also carried symbolic significance in 1984. Because the coin featured George Washington, it reminded Americans of the values associated with the first president leadership integrity and the foundation of the country's democratic system. Throughout the early 1980s, schools, businesses, and civic organizations used the image of Washington as a symbol of tradition and patriotism, and the quarter circulated as a daily reminder of national heritage. Even though it was a common coin, its imagery connected millions of people to American history. For collectors, the 1984 quarter has several levels of interest. Circulated examples are extremely common and hold face value, but uncirculated coins, especially those graded in high mint state by professional grading services, can command premium prices. A flawless MS-67 or MS-68 coin is considered scarce because even new coins from the 1980s often show small contact marks from the minting and bagging process. Proof coins with deep cameo contrast also hold collector value due to their visual beauty and limited production. The 1984 quarter also reflects the technological and cultural environment of its time. The early 1980s saw advances in computers, robotics, and manufacturing, and the mint was beginning to incorporate more automated systems. Though modern digital technology had not yet reached full maturity, the methods used to design and produce coins were gradually becoming more precise and more efficient. At the same time, the American public was becoming increasingly interested in collecting coins thanks to publications, price guides, and coin conventions that helped educate and connect hobbyists. The Washington quarter remained a stable and familiar presence in American pocket change throughout 1984 and beyond. Every coin minted that year contributed to the everyday rhythm of life, forming part of a financial system that supported commerce, transportation, entertainment, and communication. For many people, a 1984 quarter might have been the coin they used to make a phone call, buy a newspaper, play a video game, or pay a bus fare. These small transactions are part of the coin's living history. When examining the 1984 quarter from a numismatic perspective, one can appreciate the craftsmanship that went into its production. The rim denticles portrait and eagle all reflect the classical style of American coinage. The details might seem simple compared to modern commemorative coins, but they represent a period when the United States Mint focused on functionality, durability, and familiarity rather than constant design changes. The Washington quarter remained consistent by design with the goal of maintaining public trust in the nation's currency. The legacy of the 1984 Washington quarter becomes even clearer when viewed in the larger context of American numismatic history. It stands between two major eras, the long-running traditional design period and the modern era of circulating commemoratives introduced in 1999. This makes the 1980s Washington quarters part of the final generation of classic eagle-back designs before the explosion of new state and national park themes that transformed modern U.S. coinage. Even decades later, the 1984 quarter continues to circulate, though many have been lost, worn out, or collected. Some survive in mint sets or albums preserved by collectors who appreciate their connection to a specific moment in American history. Whether found in pocket change or stored in a collection, the coin represents stability, continuity, and the enduring influence of George Washington. In summary, the 1984 Washington quarter is more than just a coin. It is a piece of art, a product of advancing minting technology, a reflection of economic conditions, and a daily tool used by millions of Americans. Its history includes the evolution of its design, the transition to clad composition, the operations of the Philadelphia and Denver mints, the beauty of proof coins, and the cultural significance of Washington's portrait. Though common in circulation, each 1984 quarter carries a story shaped by the hands that used it and the history that produced it. The story of the Washington quarter, 1985, begins with the long legacy of the Washington Quarter series, which started in 1932 to honor the 200th birth anniversary of George Washington. Since its first release, the coin became one of the most familiar and widely circulated pieces of American currency, and by the time the 1980s arrived, the design had already been in use for more than 5 decades. The year 1985 stands out in this timeline as a year that continued the tradition while showing subtle changes and important minting details that coin collectors still study and appreciate. Today, we explore every detail of the 1985 Washington quarter, its background, production features, mint marks, variations, errors, and the role it played in American coinage history. To understand the 1985 quarter, we first look at its design, which follows the original work by sculptor John Flanagan. He created the portrait of George Washington based on a bust made by Jean-Antoine Houdon. The obverse of the coin features Washington facing left with the word Liberty above, and the motto, In God We Trust, placed to the left of his profile. The date, 1985, sits at the bottom, continuing a layout that collectors instantly recognize. On the reverse, the legendary eagle design appears with wings spread and perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, symbolizing strength and peace. This reverse design remained in use until 1998, making the 1985 issue part of the classic era of Washington quarters. The 1985 Washington quarter was minted at 2 locations, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. The Philadelphia Mint did not use a mint mark at that time, so any quarter from that location simply shows the date with no letter, while the Denver Mint used the letter D on the right side of the obverse near Washington's ponytail. Production numbers were strong, as the quarter was the most heavily used denomination in everyday American commerce. During 1985, the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of quarters, and the Denver Mint produced a similar amount, making the total mintage for the year well over 1 billion coins. This high production ensured the coin's widespread circulation and availability. In terms of composition, the 1985 Washington quarter continued the copper-nickel-clad formula introduced in 1965 after silver was removed from circulating coins. The outer layers of the coin consist of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This combination gives the quarter its familiar silvery appearance, but without the precious metal value earlier versions once held. The change from silver to clad may have been 2 decades old by 1985, but it remained one of the most important shifts in American coinage history. With millions of coins circulating each year, the clad quarter became an essential part of daily transactions. Collectors pay close attention to the strike-quality luster and condition of 1985 quarters because despite the high mintage, finding coins in perfect uncirculated condition is not always easy. Many coins were heavily used in circulation, leading to wear on Washington's hair, facial features, and the eagle's feathers, but coins that managed to avoid contact marks and bag scratches can grade extremely high and become valuable in the world of numismatics. Some 1985 quarters graded at the highest. Levels such as MS-67 or MS-68 can reach strong prices at auction, especially for the Denver Mint examples, which sometimes show better strikes and sharper details. There are also well-known minting errors and varieties linked to the 1985 quarter. Error coins are especially fascinating for collectors and include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die breaks, and double-struck examples. Each type of error tells a story about the minting process and mechanical conditions during production in 1985. When a coin is struck off-center, it means the planchet was not properly aligned under the dies, resulting in part of the design missing. A clipped planchet occurs when the metal strip from which blanks are punched is misaligned, causing a crescent-shaped cut on the coin. Die breaks or cuds appear when a piece of the die cracks or breaks away, leaving raised metal on the struck coin. All of these flawed coins are highly collectible and can be worth many times more than a regular 1985 quarter. Another important point in the history of the 1985 Washington quarter is the broader context of American currency during the mid-1980s. This was a period of growing economic strength, modernized minting technology, and increased demand for coins in circulation. The United States Mint continued improving quality control while increasing production efficiency. Automated systems and advanced die-making techniques allowed for more consistent strikes compared to earlier decades. As a result, many 1985 quarters display clean lettering, smooth rims, and bright mint luster when found in uncirculated condition. The Washington Quarter series itself was on the verge of a major change, though no one knew it at the time. The 1985 issue came just 14 years before the reverse design would be replaced by the State Quarters program in 1999, a program that became one of the most popular coin series in American history. While the 1985 coin still carried the traditional eagle reverse, it marks the later stage of that long-running design era. This gives the coin extra historical importance because it represents the final years of the classic Washington quarter before a dramatic transformation in the series. Studying the 1985 quarter also helps collectors appreciate the evolution of the American quarter as a whole, from the silver coins of the 1930s through early 1960s to the clad coins of the modern age. Each era reflects economic decisions, artistic preferences, and national symbolism. The 1985 quarter sits firmly in the modern clad age, but carries the traditional artwork that had defined the series for more than half a century. It bridges the past and future of American coinage, connecting the original intention of honoring Washington with the growing need for durable circulating money in a changing economy. Another aspect worth exploring is how 1985 quarters circulated in daily life across the United States. They were used in vending machines, payphones, parking meters, bus fares, and everyday purchases. Coin-operated technology was widespread, and quarters remained the most versatile coin for small transactions. Because of this heavy usage, the majority of 1985 quarters show noticeable wear today, which adds a sense of real history. These coins passed through millions of hands and reflect the everyday economy of the mid-1980s, a period full of growth, cultural change, and rising technological innovation. For collectors hunting through coin rolls, bags, or old savings piles, finding a well-struck 1985 Washington quarter with strong details and original mint shine remains a satisfying discovery. The Philadelphia and Denver coins each have their own characteristics, with some collectors preferring the sharp strikes of Denver, while others appreciate the subtle variations seen in Philadelphia issues. Regardless of mint origin, the goal is always to locate a coin with minimal marks, clean surfaces, and crisp design elements, especially on Washington's cheek hair curls and the eagle's wings. Grading companies such as PCGS and NGC have certified many 1985 quarters, but top-tier grades remain rare and valuable. Most coins fall into circulated grades or mid-level mint state, but those few that have survived in pristine condition highlight the quality of the mint's work as well as the difficulty of preserving a modern coin for decades without damage. Some of the highest-graded 1985 quarters have become reference examples for collectors studying strike characteristics, luster patterns, and die varieties of the mid-1980s. The story of the Washington quarter dollar of 1988 begins long before the year itself, because every modern coin carries with it the layers of history tradition, artistic decisions, and economic realities that shaped its creation. The Washington quarter first entered circulation in 1932 as a commemorative coin honoring the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The design created by sculptor John Flanagan became an instant national symbol and, over the decades, the coin evolved through changes in metal composition, minting technology, and production levels. By the late 1980s, the Washington quarter had become a constant presence in American pockets, vending machines, cash registers, and coin collections. The year 1988 represents a chapter in the extended life of the series, a year in which the United States Mint continued to refine production quality while dealing with rising demand from a growing economy. To understand the 1988 quarter, one must first understand the environment of American coinage during the decade. The United States had shifted in 1965 from 90% silver to a clad composition of copper and nickel, due to rising silver prices and shortages that affected the ability of the mint to supply circulating coinage. By 1988, the clad plancher had become the established standard. The quarter, therefore, was struck on a copper core coated with a nickel layer, giving it the familiar silvery appearance that Americans had grown accustomed to for more than 2 decades. The mint at this time operated in 3 major locations for circulating coins: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Philadelphia and Denver produced most of the coins meant for everyday use, while San Francisco focused largely on proof coinage for collectors. In 1988, the Philadelphia Mint struck a large number of Washington quarters, carrying no mint mark as was customary for that facility. These coins were created using high-speed presses that could churn out hundreds of coins per minute, with each plancher being fed into the coining chamber, where the dies struck the obverse and reverse designs under immense pressure. The obverse continued to feature the classical profile of George Washington, which by this time had become one of the most recognized images in United States numismatics. The reverse carried the heraldic eagle, with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows symbolizing readiness for defense, while an olive branch beneath represented the hope for peace. This combination of symbols was seen on countless coins from 1932 to 1998, and the 1988 quarter remained part of this long tradition. The Denver Mint produced its own vast supply of 1988 quarters identified by the D mint mark placed to the right of Washington's ponytail. Denver had become known for strong, sharp strikes and high-quality output during the 1980s as the mint continued to modernize its equipment and improve consistency in the coining process. Demand for coins in commerce was rising because the late 1980s saw increased consumer activity growth in the retail sector and more widespread use of coin-operated machines. All of these factors required the mint to maintain a steady flow of quarters to banks and businesses across the nation. The quarter was particularly important because it had become the backbone of vending machines, laundromats, arcades, toll booths, and parking meters, all of which relied heavily on this denomination. Meanwhile, the San Francisco Mint continued its role as the producer of proof coins. The 1988 S proof Washington quarter was manufactured using polished planchets and specially prepared dies that were cleaned frequently to maintain mirror-like surfaces. Proof coins were struck at lower speed and with higher pressure to achieve sharper detail and contrasting finishes. The frosted design elements and reflective fields of the proof quarter made it a favorite among collectors who sought to preserve these coins in protective cases. Proof sets sold by the Mint that year included the penny nickel dime quarter and half-dollar, all bearing the S Mint mark. These sets represented a significant part of the Mint's annual revenue through collector sales. The overall design of the Washington quarter in 1988 remained essentially unchanged from previous years. But subtle shifts in die-quality engraving details and minting standards created variations that collectors today study closely. Small changes in lettering thickness, spacing feather detail on the eagle or hair strands on Washington can sometimes help numismatists identify specific die varieties. The late 1980s were also a period in which errors and varieties gained interest because high-speed production occasionally resulted in misaligned dies, clipped planchets off center strikes, or die cracks. While most errors were caught and destroyed at the Mint, some escaped into circulation, creating fascinating pieces that collectors now consider treasures of the 1988 quarter series. Coin collecting itself was becoming more popular during the 1980s, due in part to the influence of magazines, coin shows, and expanding hobby networks. Many people saved examples of new coins from each year and mint mark. As a result, the 1988 quarter is relatively accessible today in circulated and uncirculated condition. Yet pristine, high-grade examples, especially from rolls stored carefully since their release, can command premiums, because not all quarters survive the decades without wear or contact marks. The surfaces of clad quarters are particularly prone to scratches and dulling, which makes perfect mint state coins somewhat harder to find than their large mintages might suggest. The economy of 1988 influenced coin production in several ways. Inflation had changed how Americans spent money, and quarters were increasingly needed for everyday transactions. The United States Mint therefore targeted efficient production schedules and improved quality control processes. Advances in metallurgy and planchet preparation ensured more consistent metal surfaces and weights. The presses used in Philadelphia and Denver were powerful and precise, enabling the Mint to produce billions of coins annually, across all denominations. The quarter remained one of the heaviest circulating coins and thus required careful calibration of striking pressure to preserve the detail of Washington's portrait and the eagle design. The year 1988 falls near the end of the long era of the original Flanagan reverse because just a decade later in 1999, the Mint would launch the historic 50 state quarters program, replacing the eagle with rotating state designs. This makes the 1988 quarter part of the final chapter of the classic design era. It represents the stability of American coinage before the major transformations that defined the turn of the century. For this reason, many collectors view quarters of the late 1980s as historically meaningful pieces bridging the old and the new in United States numismatics. In daily life, the 1988 quarter played a crucial role in vending culture, which was booming with soda machines, snack dispensers, newspaper boxes, parking meters, and arcade games requiring multiple quarters for operation. Children during that era often carried quarters for video games, while adults used them for transit systems and everyday purchases. The presence of the 1988 quarter in millions of transactions means that these small coins represent a snapshot of American society at the time, reflecting purchasing habits, prices, and lifestyles. Each coin circulated through countless hands, witnessing the everyday life of people across the nation.